Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here this evening. My name is Rugiana Torres Reyes, and I serve in the Division of Mission and Ministry as an AVP for Student Engagement. I'm really grateful that you're here this evening, and I am really stoked for this panel discussion. I'm very fortunate that some of my dear friends are on the panel, and then some of the folks that I hope will be my lifelong friends after today are also on this panel. What I want to do is begin with a bit of quiet. I'd like us to send some positive energy. I want to share some actually really tragic news with you all. One of our panelists, if you look at your program, if you have a program in front of you, you'll see, if you flip it over to the back side, that one of our panelists, Marquita Sims, won't be joining us today. And the reason Marquita won't be able to join us is that unfortunately her family was heavily impacted by violence in our city, and she lost her son 2 days ago to gun violence. What I'd like to do is ask that we all take a moment of quiet, and I'm timing us. And if during that quiet you pray, I'd ask that you pray. If you chant, if you send good energy, if you send love or healing, I'd appreciate that for Marquita. On behalf of her son, Devane Jones, thank you. And I'd ask that you continue to send them after this moment healing energy. We are going to begin with a snippet. There was, if you were in the space, there was a video playing on loop from the Visiting Room Project. We have a representative from the Visiting Room Project with us today on the panel, but we wanted to get started with just a snippet of one of those videos that you may or may not have seen while people were snacking and connecting. So we're going to play that, and then we are going to get started.
People come and see us, and they tell us how great we are and how we bless their lives, and yet they leave us in this condition. And they said, man, keep being a great guy till I come back again. I'll see you next year. And then we lose our hair, and we begin to get gray, and then we start having a stoop, we bend over, and then they have to visit us on the ward, and then it's all over. And I just pray that people can realize that there are everyday people behind these walls who love, who get sad, who hurt, who are happy, who have dreams. You can lock us up, but you can't stop us from being human beings. My name is Darrell Waters, and I'm serving a life sentence for second-degree murder. The crime was committed in 1992. I was 23 years old, and I've been incarcerated for 24 years. I was raised primarily by my grandparents. I had a beautiful experience, beautiful childhood. They were devout Christians, and they raised me as their own child. Actually, my grandfather, who was in his 70s, was my childhood friend. You know, you would see us, you would see this old man sitting down in the dirt and playing with this little kid, and we were inseparable. My grandmother, she was my first teacher. Before I was old enough to attend school, she taught me how to count, how to read and write. And every day, you know, they would ask me to rehash everything that I learned in school every single day. Growing up, all of my uncles, they were all alcoholics and womanizers, everyone. None of the women used alcohol or drugs. I started at the age of 8, I still remember, stealing a bottle of Budweiser out of an ice chest. I still remember, and I ran around my mother's house, grandmother's house. I tried it, it was bitter, it was nasty. And so I didn't really drink much. And being in the country, there's nothing to do. So we would flirt with things like that. Let's drink a beer, you know, let's smoke some weed or whatever. As I got older, it wasn't a problem because I loved school. And so I didn't want to be inundated. I didn't want to be distracted in any way. So the drinking really became a problem when I left for college. Joined a fraternity prematurely, in my opinion. And I started partying. I really started being irresponsible at the wrong time. It's never a good time, but that was the worst time. So as a kid, I was very disciplined, but as a college student, I lacked discipline. And I started drinking a lot, and it became a serious problem. I had a partial scholarship because of an injury. So my mother had to pay a little money each semester. So my grandmother informed me that the money I was receiving was money that was reserved for our home, part of the mortgage. And upon hearing that, I was very, very sad. I wrote my mother a letter and I returned the check. And I made a very, very stupid decision. I decided to leave college and to hit the streets. I decided to make my own way selling drugs. I think the inability to cope with failure probably hurt me more than anything else, because every morning I would wake up, look in the mirror and just become angry. I had a lot of self-hatred because I couldn't believe what I had done to myself. And so the only way to overcome it would be to just get drunk quickly. And that was the only way I could cope. I didn't have any other coping skills at the time. I fully accept responsibility, and I would love nothing more than to be able to express from my heart how sorry I am for having committed this crime.
I'd like to invite our panelists and our moderators to please come on up to the table, and we will begin our conversation. We have name tags. That's it. I did.
I'm gonna keep her out of trouble.
I'll keep him out of trouble.
Don't keep each other out of trouble.
We know.
I'd like to begin by introducing Jessie Chang, a member of our faculty at the law school, who's going to be moderating our conversation today. I'll let him introduce himself and get started.
Thank you everyone for having me here today. I am a brand new professor.
Use the
Absolutely.
mic. Oh, mic.
There it is right there, that's what it's for. Hello?
You all need to turn yours on when
Oh,
you
okay.
speak. And the button will go toward you.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me here today. I am a brand new professor here at DePaul Law School. I come here after a number of years, actually, as a practicing lawyer who specialized on death penalty cases. My practice focused on doing everything that was in my legal power to prevent death sentences from happening, and that's a lot of what my research focuses on right now. I'm very honored to welcome back to campus Sister Helen Prejean, whom I actually had the pleasure of meeting just a little bit earlier this fall when she was awarded the highest honor bestowed by the university on individuals, the Vincent DePaul Award. Sister Helen is known all around the world for her tireless work against the death penalty, which includes not least of all her 1993 book, Dead Man Walking, and her efforts as well with her organization, the Ministry Against the Death Penalty. Now, joining Sister Helen and all of us in conversation today is a group of panelists who each have really quite amazing and valuable perspectives to share with all of us about the power of storytelling. So they are Ronaldo Hudson, just to the right of me, the Director of Education at the Illinois Prison Project. There's Ayere Ekosele, Youth Advisory Board Member with the Youth Empowerment Performance Project. There is Brian Rogers of the Speaker Bureau, Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And I'll refer you all to our guest program bios, which will do a bit more justice than I can in this very compressed period of time I have here. And finally, we have with us Sophie Cole, a founding team member of the Visiting Room Project, portions of which you have just seen. Sophie will share with us more today about this exciting and important multimedia storytelling project that features more than 100 interviews with people serving life without parole sentences. Okay, so to kick off the conversation today, Sister Helen, if it's okay with you, I thought I'd open things up, although certainly everybody can feel free to jump in whenever they're so moved. We have with us, again, this group of amazing individuals who deeply understand the power of storytelling, or as they might say in the church, acts of witnessing or testimony. What is the importance of testimony when it comes to advocating for social justice?
Well, for me, I was one of the few people that actually got to witness an execution. It's a semi-secret ritual. 1,500 people in this country since we put the death penalty down in 1976 have been gassed and shot and lethally injected and electrocuted, and nobody's seen it. I mean, who knows that? We could read about it in the paper afterwards, and there's this saying in Latin America that what the eye doesn't see, the heart can't feel. And then in this incredible journey of my own, woke up to justice, got an invitation to write a man on death row, and then was with him, and then was with him when he was executed. And it's what you were saying, Jesse. When you become a witness, and you know the rest of society is not awake on the issue there, they think the opposite. They say, yeah, he got what he deserved. Those people are criminals. But you see that, and you know that that person has a dignity and know their human rights. I have a moral obligation, a moral imperative for their voice to be heard and their story to be told, and also to explain how the system's broken and how the system's racist and how the system chooses people who are poor. And because I didn't know about any of this before I woke up to it, and my understanding of the spiritual life and grace is it's what wakes us up. And so I have that moral imperative to be a witness and to tell the story, and that's why I wrote Dead Man Walking. So we have extra copies here because we got a grant for these books. And I want you to read this book, and I got extras for you if you don't have one.
And there's a movie, by the way, starring Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn.
Yeah, and there's also a documentary that's being made talking about the last 35 years of the death penalty movement and how we are shutting it down. There's still huge pockets of resistance, but the way it is moving toward the shore. And it's going to be structured around the archives here at DePaul. So I spent 6 hours in the archives with Morgan, who's there, and so they tell the story of Dead Man Walking and the work for advocacy. Here's the first letter from the first man on death row. Here's a letter from a victim's family. Here we have a whole file called Ardent Foes. What you think you doing as a nun? You ought to go get your habit back on, getting in the back of the classroom, hanging out with these murderers. You know, why don't you work for innocent children? Or, you know, foes, just giving it to you right and left. It's all there as part of the story. And so the special thing of being here at DePaul, because it's of the Vincentian spirit in St. Vincent de Paul, who was surrounded by, unbelievable problems of people starving to death, a religious war, a corrupt hierarchy. The rich bishops would hire somebody to run the diocese and they'd go live off and go be in their club in Paris. They had big problems. And his question, which is our question too, what needs to be done and what can I do? And so that has fed my advocacy and why I'm here and why I give talks around the country, especially aiming at young people because you're a hope.
The heart cannot feel what the eyes cannot see. That's amazing. Sophie, you founded the Visiting Room Project to bring into the light these stories that were formerly silenced to help make the invisible seen. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey with this project and maybe a little bit about how it was founded, the vision of it?
Sure. I would be remiss not to start with how I got here from Australia, which is that I read Dead Man Walking when I was 15. And, it was the cover that on the book of the version my dad had was of the electric chair with the leather straps. And just the cover of the book, for me, I think I started pulling that book off my dad's bookshelf when I was 12. And there was something drawing me to it and also telling me, you're not ready for that. And I would come across this book every year or two and think, one day I'm gonna read that, but not yet. And I think I was 14 or 15 when I finally sort of had the courage to take it to my room and I read it, and that account, that witness of Helen's friendship with Patrick Saunier and then his execution, and the dread and the beauty in that really shifted something for me, and I wanted to come here and work against the death penalty. And when I was 21, I came and began working at a law office in Louisiana that represents people on death row. So that's just to say the power of those encounters can stretch to, wide spaces. And I'm very grateful for Helen and for that act of witness that we've been invited into as well. So working at those law offices, our job as advocates was to tell the stories of clients on death row and try to sort of do justice to their long lives in the context of what the criminal legal system allows us to talk about, what's relevant to a criminal case. And in the course of working on those cases, I also got to begin visiting with people serving life without parole in Louisiana, because a number of our clients who used to be on death row had their sentences reduced to life without parole. And I just wanted to share the story of one client to sort of answer your question, Jesse, which is a man named Lawrence, who was 16 years old when he was put on death row in Louisiana for the murder of two white victims in Jefferson Parish, which is what we describe as a white flight suburb of New Orleans. And Lawrence was taken off death row and sentenced to life without parole after the US Supreme Court said that we can't execute children anymore. But he's still serving life without parole today. And I first met with him probably, well, he was one of the first people I met at Angola. And that was 15 years ago. And, you know, there were so many things about Lawrence's case that the public needed to know, you know, that I wanted the public to understand that he was a getaway driver in a car who didn't understand that the murders were happening at the time that the victims were killed, that prosecutors seeking death against him wore neckties to his trial that had the Grim Reaper and a noose on their neckties, that he was sentenced by a white jury who understood very little about the life of a of a black child growing up in the South. But in all that time I got to spend with Lawrence, what I found more and more, what I really wish people had a chance to see, was what it was like to just sit in a room with him, in a visiting room at Angola, and spend an hour just sitting and sharing and listening, and seeing the way his face lit up when he talked about his grandmother and the memories of her that was still so visceral, of her coming into his room every morning to wake him for school, and then having this brief moment, this tender moment between a grandmother and her grandson, that 30 years later were the moments he still missed the most about being in the outside world. And it was those sort of small, tender, intimate moments that I really wish people had a chance to see in our clients. And so when I met a professor who wanted to go and interview people serving life without parole, and then began to see some of the initial film he brought back from those first interviews, I said to Marcus, who is the professor who interviewed the contributors in the visiting room, I said, I don't think you understand what you have here, but as someone who's been going into prisons for over a decade and spending time with people and understanding how rare and sacred that is, you've got something really remarkable that needs to be shared much more broadly than the academic audience he first imagined. So, you know, when I see videos of people like Darryl who just talk about his grandfather sitting with him and playing in the dirt, they're the details and the textures of everyday life that I think when we have a chance to see them in other people, we recognize them in ourselves, and that becomes an empathic encounter that has the power to restore us to each other in a way that I think only sharing life can.
I love that last phrase, restore us to each other, because that's how it's supposed to be originally, that we are supposed to be connected to each other, and somehow those connections have been lost. Thank you, Sophie. Shifting gears just a little bit, you know, stories are often thought of as these things that are told or maybe perhaps like visually shown through video, but of course they can be communicated in so many different forms. And here, Ayere, as someone myself who's very movement challenged, I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about, you know, your experience with dance and the performing arts and the impact of that in your works with social justice.
Go, sister.
Ooh,
Really loaded question.
Jeez. Let me get on myself.
Hey, we want to know.
Can we ask that question again? Let me get into it.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to know about loosening up, right? Dance. How that works for you. How you change the world.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to tie this into what we're talking about here today.
However you like.
Using art. You know how I tell my story is through dance, right? Through performing arts, through singing, through acting, through storytelling, or theatrical storytelling. The biggest thing to me is healing, right? And healing can help so many things, right? Although these people are incarcerated and there's no life, healing is still necessary for them to be comfortable in the place that they're in right now, you know what I mean? And so the way I use art as a way of healing is to to really go into those deep dark places that of trauma, you know, that are impacting your life, and really like face them and pull them up and just I guess relive that story, relive that trauma that I went through movement, right? Whether there's music or not, but that's pretty much how I do that. And it's not an easy thing. We think, you know, it's art and all that. It's not easy. It's still pretty hard to go into those deep dark places. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's how I use art and dance to heal.
Yeah.
Also, I'm working on a program called Healing Through Movement program, where we go through the organization that I'm with, YEP, where we use art as an outlet of healing, is to go through intense healing cycle sessions with each other as well as individual, and from those create theatrical or choreographic pieces based off of true life stories, and then putting them out there for people to see and whatnot. It's something that I'm working on. But yeah, and I want to do that with all types of people, all types of backgrounds and cultures and situations and whatnot. But anyway, I would love to get into the. Can y'all hear me? I would love to get into these prisons and do some movement stuff. You know, healing through movement with these people, and address these. Just talking about it sometimes isn't enough, right? You need to relive that moment and live it in the way. This is a really a big part, a component of this, is reliving that story in the way that you want it to be, in the way that you see it, right? And so allowing these people to relive their lives and their stories through movement in the way that they want it to be seen and to be told. I think it's very important, and art helps to do that in a different way than other ways of healing.
That's great. Thank you, Ayane. Just this idea of taking control of the narrative, and that reminds me a lot of what you and I were talking about, Ronaldo. So Ronaldo, I gotta say, I have selfish motives, you know, given where he comes from and his own personal experiences and how it kind of resonates with my own background in the death penalty field. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
No.
Pretty please.
Talk about this before you came, now you know what you're supposed to do.
Yes, I repent. I'm gonna try to be better. No, I think this is so important. Like, when I think about the death penalty, which people that don't know my story, I spent 13 years on the Illinois death row, and you actually called for my life to be spared. You know, because Governor Ryan was like, I gotta do what she say. And so, right? Because I think sometimes people forget those moments of acknowledgement, you know, that really plays a major role in how things roll out, you know. And so I do want to acknowledge that I knew that before I ever met you. Then I met you and I fell in love with you. So I'm like, she the real
in front
bit.
of a whole lot of people. Microphone, man.
I know, but I'll tell you why this is important. I believe the Bible when it says perfect love casts away fear. I believe the Bible when it says that the eyes of the Lord looks to and fro on the earth to see whose heart is made perfect toward him, that he might show himself strong. And so while I was sitting in a death row cell, guilty, waiting to die, I fell in love with a man named Jesus. And so I began to see the world differently. And so I did not, and have never attempted to hide from my responsibility for my bad decisions. But I am a part of a system that is adversarial, lawyer, right? Like, it is designed to never really bring people to accountability and responsibility in a way that brings healing. And so I now work in a space where healing is not just crime victim, let this person be punished. because that doesn't heal, that just produces more pain. And so I'm a believer, and I subscribe to the idea that if you understand and get a chance to meet me, right, you'll find that I'm more than my worst decision. And while I can be responsible for an act, I'm not the act. And we live in a society that paint people by their worst decisions, and we never want to make room, right? And so because I believe we'll never win the argument of true legal justice, because I don't think justice exists in this space, but legal justice has to come in the form of every person that's sitting in a cell and every person heard, voices are heard. And then we figure out how do we bring harm reduction and not just punishment, you know? And so I'm an advocate of harm reduction. So I went from, and I don't know, I don't look like it, but I served 37 years within the Illinois Department of Correction, 7 years in the Cook County Jail, 13 years on Illinois death row, and then 17 years with life without the possibility of parole. In 2003, Governor Ryan, right, gave me along with, because it was really for me. No, but I know, like, Jesus so loved me. Well, the Bible tells me so. So it's like, I'm with that. Oh Lord, have mercy. And so I'm saying that, and I don't want to go off, but I will. Only because I'm a believer that people have been made to believe that there's nothing but monsters in cells. And I'm telling you that I'm the person responsible for the death of a man, and I live with that shame. But I'm equally responsible for deciding I'm so much better than that. And I can live the rest of my life as an advocate of saying to people, in life you're gonna fall down. But if you can look up, you can get up. And so people want to refuse, you know, systems exist by keeping harm, you know, stimulated, right? I tell people a perfect example, after 37 years of incarceration, they gave me a parole officer who patrolled my trauma, right?
Right.
And I needed a therapist to help me unpack it. And I'm like, dude, like, what do you want? Why are you bothering me? I wasn't even angry. Like, all the years in prison, I wasn't angry. I would walk around singing because I woke up to who I am. And I'm like, I'm better than this, and I'm not accepting this. And so I'm saying all that to say that we can talk about the innocence, because in the 90s, when the death penalty, you know, was moved against, it was the era of the innocent, it was the time of innocence. And I used to raise my hand. Excuse me, if you're going to stop killing because of innocent people, then what do you do with Ronaldo? Because you're saying you can kill me, and I'm saying I object. And I wasn't a lawyer, right? I didn't even have a GED. Right now I do. And yeah, I have a Bachelor of Divinity too. And so, but my point though, you all, really is that I know that storytelling is vitally important. The Bible says, for they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the words of what? Their testimony. And so I have a testimony that despite my worst decision, I'm here. Because I chose to believe, God chose to be gracious. He chose to plant his soldiers everywhere. Like, I tease you, but I love you, right? Because, like, your voice is so powerful. And when we come together, and that's what I keep trying to get everybody to see, we're powerful when we stand together, right? And the people that don't want to see us be successful want to keep us separated, right? And so I chose to start changing that narrative while still in prison, right? And today I was down in Southern Illinois talking to a college course, auditorium, about the dangerous one-sided narrative, which is, how dare you say you have the high moral ground when you're talking about me, but you turn the mic down on me, right? You can't take my voice, but you can lower my voice. And I want to make sure the voices of even the guilty, right? Because people need to hear someone who's guilty say, I'm sorry. And I'll never, ever, ever do anything like that again. Give me a chance to show you the best of us. We can be so much better. And that, to me, is the testament of the gospel.
Brian, you had your own experience of being locked up, and now you're advocating for these folks who don't have something that so many people take for granted, which is a home. So how did you get from one point to the other?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to thank you all, first of all, for joining our panel. Gracious host for having me. The rest of our speakers up here on the panel, I also would like to thank you too, in spite of the tragedy that we had to endure alongside of our co-part, Ms. Marquita Sims. Yes, I have an experience with the criminal justice system, 15 to 20 years. At this present time, I am a grassroots speaker for Chicago Coalition of the Homeless, which advocates for homeless individuals who can have affordable housing, and individuals who have experienced injustices in the criminal justice system. When we talk about the criminal justice system and the voices that are locked up behind that which need to be heard, there's a wide range. Like Mr. Hudson said, as far as that voice that needs to be heard, individuals change. Most of the individuals that committed crimes at a young age were under the 25-year-old threshold for brain development. So when we look at that, we have to say, what do we do with this person for the rest of their lives? Do we take them out of here, or do we lock them up for the rest of their lives? Either or, it's a death sentence. The fact that there is so much growing and so much talent that are inside of those walls. The short clip that played as we were waiting to speak, guy was 83 years old when he spoke. But the fact that he made the comment, man, I can't wait to get out of here and start doing something different to change. So what did I tell you? He held on to hope. He believed that he changed. There are people that do change. We make mistakes. Everyone in this room has made a mistake. Whether how detrimental it has been, for whatever reasons. But that does not mean that you do not deserve a second chance. We all know that our system is not the best. It's not the fairest. Neither are our laws and policies in all aspects of life and society. But the point is to recognize those, to hear those stories, to hear those injustices, to hear those societal ills. Sit down, meet with these people, talk, advocate, see what you can do, how you can get involved. You care about your life. You're part of society. We're all in this together. Regardless of how we might feel divided on whatever issue it may be, the fact remains is we all are here together. So when we look at these things that take place on an aspect of individuals that have been in there for decades, some died because of inadequate health care, some just died because of old age, some died prematurely because of violence that takes place, whether it's at the hands of other individuals who are incarcerated or it's by staff. I wanted to bring something to light as far as if you guys really wanted to know what's really going on in our prison system, there is a pamphlet, Prison Legal News. This deals with prison systems all across this country. The stories that you would find in there are amazing. This is just a small touch and tidbit. Small touch and tidbit about the story in Louisiana. See, nobody really never hears about what happened during COVID, what happens during flooding times in some of those coastal prisons where inmates are just sat in there and and the water's up to here, and the guards is 6 guards governing 1,500 people, and all sorts of wide ranges. We all say, hey, you know, somebody committed a crime. I'm not saying you don't do your time. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, it gets to the point where we have to decide, do we have a compassionate obligation that this person is actually a human, and to treat them as such? I implore you to recognize, to seek out diligently, wherever you can, wherever it may be. I don't know what walks of life you all come from. If you have somebody that's incarcerated, if you know somebody who has somebody that's incarcerated. The work is important, change is important. We have a moral obligation, in other words, to see fit that anybody in this country, because we don't live in a third world country, we don't live in the rest of the world, we live in America. America's supposed to be just. We're supposed to have opportunities on land, second chances, third chances sometimes, if need be. So, as citizens in our society, to hear these stories from these different walks of life and however you can help, or to see past or through someone's story, I implore you to reach out, to do what you can. And that's all I want to tell you right now, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ryan talks about this moral obligation, and every single one of you up here, you're doing such transformative work to fulfill that moral obligation, but at the same time, it's very difficult work. And I just want to know, opening it up to all of you, how do you continue to find the hope to carry on doing what you do in the face of what I know to be just incredible challenges, so many forces that are working against you?
That's easy. I don't know how to swim. I want to say that right now. But I've been swimming metaphorically most of my life. And I woke up one day and I turned the light on. And what I noticed, what I was floating in, was feces and urine. And I realized in that moment, hey, this is a sewage. This is a place of waste. And I recognized something. I had the ability to acknowledge, to recognize what it was, which meant I could do something about it. And so for me, and I say this not to minimize the work, but it's easy now because I don't dwell there anymore. But I know it exists. I could still smell it. I still hear toilets being flushed, right? And so when I get up and look in the mirror, I say, to those that much is given, much is required. And so I don't get to play and act like I don't know that there's a price to everything. For those that go to school, you know, you have micro and, you know, and you start dealing with the different variables and exponents with algebra, because people try to tell you, I don't know why they want us to study algebra, you'll never use it. Well, I learned that that's not true, because when you deal with injustice in our so-called justice system, you see aggravating factors that you understand as a lawyer, which is the circumstances of the case. And then you see mitigating factors, which is the exponents, right? And, right, the variables. And you can say, to get to the equation, I have to count this stuff. And so I say that, all of that to say, I don't have a choice. Like, I don't get tired. Like, cause I woke up and looked in the mirror, and I'm cute. So when I look in the mirror, like, I am, like, I like it all. Right? But no, I'm saying that to say, like, I'm excited to stay in this work. I'm excited to inspire young people to say, don't you dare don't you dare get tired, because there's too many people still suffering. And so I don't have a choice. I don't have a like, I wish I could say, but I know how many people, like just this week, last couple of weeks, you know, men and women have been receiving clemency denials, right, this week. I know what it feels like to be sitting in a death row cell. I know what it feels like to be sitting in a cell with life without the possibility of parole, right? I know what it feels like to be a male and hiding the shame of being sexually assaulted and being told, don't you say anything. So I have empathy, right, to where I'm not going to hide my shame. I'm actually going to use it to inspire myself and others to keep moving. This train got to keep moving. And I just can't get tired. I'm just not tired. I'm sorry. It's been 37 years. I think I got another 30 left before the good Lord takes me. And so for me, I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know what I'm going to do. And so for me, I'm hopeful because I was sitting in a death row cell, guilty, and I walked out. And I didn't compromise my integrity. I surrendered my heart, which is different. Yeah.
Wow. So, for you, the awareness is its own calling. Yeah. Anybody else want to weigh in? What keeps you hoping? What keeps you going?
What keeps me going, the experience of meeting the individuals. When you're, as a place that I'm at now, which is St. Leonard's Ministries, when you see an individual come into that door, and that individual, you sit down and you have a conversation with him, you don't know him from Adam and Eve. You don't know who he is, what walks of life, and how he's got to where you're at. All you know is he's probably incarcerated, and he's here now, he's out. But when an individual tells you, man, I just did 48 years. I'm 70-something years old. I'm thinking like, what? 70-something years old? 40, how many years? Almost, I should say, because I don't like to, almost as old as me. When you look at those individuals and you see the everyday joy and the gratefulness and the humbleness that, hey, I made it. I made it. Because when you go through things like the stress of being in a cell 23 hours out of the day on a daily basis, sometimes 24 hours, when the institution goes on lockdown for 6 months to 8 months, when you get your food brought to you in a styrofoam tray, and by the time it gets to you, you don't really know what it is by that time because it's all mixed up and it's stone cold. When you lay on those beds and your body hurts, and I'm in my 40s, I'm not shy to say my age. When you feel like you got arthritis like you're 80 years old, when it's stone cold, and no matter how much clothing you put on, and you're still cold in your cell, when you breathe, and you can see his breath, when you cut those showers on, and you look this way, and you look this way, and it's another man, we're this close apart. On a daily basis, there's no privacy. There's no empathy, but one bright light for facilities that do have programs in which you can kind of have some sense of well-being, some sense of normalcy, like seeing colors on the wall, such as building blocks. Such as the building blocks program, Mr. Hudson. When you can walk into that deck and you can actually do things according to a normal schedule in society, instead of seeing the grays, the blues, the dullness, the uniforms, constantly double it up, shut it up. You sit down, you got 5 minutes for lunch, you got 5 minutes for dinner. Next, get up. You don't get up, you're cuffed up. All of those things keep me driving and advocating for change. When you go through the system and you see the malicious prosecutorial practices, which you know is wrong, and then you see the judge who sits there and allows it, and then you see the public defender who sits there and, because of case laws or whatever reason, does not push or fight for you, and you see the individual, the defendant, regardless of the nature of the crime of which they're being charged of, who does not know his rights, her rights. When you get those shiny jewelry bracelets, as I like to say, placed on you for whatever reasons, and you take that ride to CPD, and you take that ride and you spend years in Cook County Jail, Will County Jail, DuPage County Jail, and as you go through the system and you see individuals acting out over a period of time because of the trauma that they're experiencing at that particular moment, and you see the brokenness, you see the spirits, the majority of individuals that come through the system from the walks of life are coming up. They are broken individuals, the majority of them. Things that need to be treated. One, such as myself. Not to say that I didn't grow up in a good, loving home, but something was broken. So these are the things in which drives me to keep me going forward, to fight for all of these social issues that we're sitting here talking about today. Thank you.
Hey. What's up? Come on, what's up? Get a little ratchet. Like, I don't have that. You know what I'm saying? Healing is what keeps me going. The more that I heal, the more that I learn to love myself and learn to have more compassion for myself. And it gives me the ability to have more love and compassion for other human beings in their lives and their stories. Yeah, and being able to be resilient and having tenacity and being able to get through what I've been through in life. You know what I mean? I've been through some things. And really when I sit back and I think about all those things I've been through and how did I get through that, and how do I keep pushing and pushing in a way that I can advocate for other people, and create space and rooms and platforms for people to tell their stories and for people to see them for who they truly are. And not their experience, but who they are, you know what I'm saying? Because we aren't homeless, we experience homelessness, right? We aren't the prison, we are experiencing incarceration, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is, right? And then I just lost my train of thought, right? Oh, there we go. At the end of it all, for me, what gives me the resilience and the tenacity and the ability to have grace for other people and mercy for other people is when I think about the mercy and the grace that God has for me each and every day. Because I'm not perfect, right? And it just allows me to keep pushing to give other people, other humans, that same grace and that same mercy. I made it because of God. That's it, you know, for me, and the anointing and the calling that He has on my life to help and heal people.
What keeps me going is a man that sits in a cell in Angola, Louisiana. He's been on death row 30 years and he's innocent and he's not a grease spot on the floor. He's a man of tremendous courage. I want to point out Rose Bynes is here with me too. We're partners in our work together, and Rose handles all the social media and all that, but she's there in the visiting too with Manuel Ortiz. The court system is so bad. It is so broken. I mean, when you finally do get good lawyers, you get the witnesses, you get the evidence, and you try to get it into an appeals court, They have what they call procedural bars, and you can't get it in. So if you come out of that trial and you've been found guilty and sentenced to death, your ability to break those chains once they're there on you are really, really hard. We're witnessing right now Richard Glossop, been on death row in Oklahoma 26 years. Appeals court turned him down twice, and just yesterday, the clemency board turned him down, and he's in the Whitewater Rapids heading toward the execution chamber in Oklahoma. And it's just inconceivable what has happened to him and what happened at his trial and what the jury didn't hear. And all it takes is one juror with reasonable doubt that he would not have been convicted. And he's got all kind of people speaking up for him now. He's got 60 members from the GOP, red state, pro-death penalty legislators on his side. He has the unheard of Attorney General of the state who changed and actually appealed to the appeals court to vacate the conviction of this man because he didn't get a fair trial, who spoke for him before the clemency board, and they turned it down. And he's experiencing tremendous backlash and anger from prosecutors for doing what he did. And now it's in the hands of a governor of whether or not this man is going to live. It is so capricious, so broken. And how do you just not succumb to it? So Manuel comes from El Salvador. He was a day away from getting his citizenship, turns up to, take the oath and all, didn't have a quorum that day. So then he goes to trial, and in that white bedroom community of Jefferson Parish, a Latina guy didn't have a chance. And I mean, the closing argument of that prosecutor to that jury, you know how these Latinas are. They come to this country, they marry an American woman, then they up the insurance money, then they have a murder. You know those Latinas, and then they get the money and they go back and live like kings. He said that to the jury, and no court in Louisiana found that that was racist. It's just so hard. And how does he keep going? And that keeps me going. So I can't say, oh, I'm gonna go get another graduate degree and I'm gonna go do something else. No way, because I'm there with him. I was just reading in the words of scripture for yesterday. It's in the Gospel of John. The Father, in the Father's name, I don't lose anybody. I'm not going to lose anybody. Holding us fast, holding us tight. We got to do that, of course, with each other. And so that's why I keep going, because of Manuel, because of Richard Glossop. And also what keeps me going is a belief in the goodness of the American people. It's just that people are not awake. They're separated from seeing the suffering. I'm so glad we got the visiting room project, just to meet people, just to hear their voices of real live human beings, and not let people call them monsters and scum of the earth and these convicts, and they gonna con you. The very name, they gonna con you. Oh yeah, they all find Jesus in prison. This stereotyping human beings and throwing them away. Pope Francis is big on that. Don't dispose people. Disposable people. One of his first acts as Pope, he was just elected. Next thing you know, he's in a prison washing the feet of Muslim people and people in prison. And he's saying the gospel of encountering. And we all can live in a bubble. We all, So anyway, I've met some brave people. And I better be brave. I better be out there, man. I can't not do it. And you just have to, And that keeps me going.
Thank you.
Everybody else?
I look out there, I see so many young faces, and I wonder, those of you up here on the panel, what do you wish you knew when you were sitting in their shoes, being as young as they are, looking out at this world with curiosity, right, but also with perhaps a little bit of apprehension or uncertainty?
I was thinking, I think I'm still I'm still figuring out a lot from the last question and this question. I think I just need to learn from the people on this panel. You know, I'm a white woman who grew up in a middle class environment in a small community where I could have lived with a certain comfort and way of life without anyone ever really interrupting that. And it was from encounters with people that unsettled that way of living that I was born into. That is the reason that I'm here and doing this work rather than and continuing on in that way of living. And as I hear what Helen's saying about stereotyping people, it makes me think about the disconnect and the inhuman way that those in power have to live to maintain that power, and that's actually damaging for everybody in that equation. But those of us born into that sort of power have to choose to give it up. And I just think about the richness of life that I've been invited into from knowing people that I wouldn't have gotten a chance to know, and seeing the human strength that people have inside of them from the people I've had those empathic encounters with, that I was, in an environment where I could have been told not to have those encounters, that they, that was the choice that I was given. I think it's just how you want to, the real world is the experiences that have been shared on this panel. That is the world that we live in. And people who see it in terms of stereotypes and in terms of safety and in terms of power aren't able to experience all of the richness of actual human connection that comes when you see through that lie. So I just feel incredibly grateful for those opportunities. And as hard as it is to hear the stories of what people in this panel, for instance, have gone through, it's also a gift to have those stories shared with me. And for me, that just calms a lot of, I can't remember the words you used, but sort of trepidation or let's just go get it together. I don't know. if this is the world we live in, then let's do it together,
Can I say believe it or not, I got something to say. Yes, don't be shocked. Like, I would say that to what I call young people like myself, because I'm 59 years young, but I would say, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can't make mistakes, right? That's why they bring people in to fix stuff. They call them mechanics, engineers, and it's people's job to catch it, to clean up. And I think that we do a disservice when we don't give people the room to break stuff, to make mistakes, to be gracious, So I wish someone would have told me it's okay to be frightened, but don't be paralyzed by the fear, And so, to me, real faith is being afraid and still moving, I was afraid, as much as I can talk stuff, there were moments, sister, when they was walking people out to executions, I got quiet, not because I was so brave, but I was frightened. Because I realized how vulnerable I really was in that moment. And I realized how much power that we as a people have given to states, that we've given to people with no real checking power. We can't call them back, until we unelect them, And so now I'm really big on remembering. Man, I tell people all the time, I pay taxes. Like, you work for me, you're going to hear me out. But I would say to all the young people, like, please don't fear dropping stuff, breaking stuff, right? You'll be so much better. And I'm not saying that to any parent that go home and your kids or your youngsters start breaking stuff, and that, well, now I'm gonna see if we should break stuff. Like, I'm like, well, I ain't dead and I ain't gotta pay for it. But y'all follow me, like, please, 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 please. Like, I wanna be an advocate also. Like, I'm over this white guilt stuff. I wanna tell y'all that right now. Stop being so guilty about everything. It wasn't you. Now you can step back, like I'm big on that. You know, don't take up so much space with your whiteness. Right. But at the same time, you don't have to be so, I'm white, I better not say anything. Like, when I was on death row, I have to remind people of stuff. It was this little bitty little white nun that had a hook, like a rain, umbrella. And I was like, man, this is what you do, so
Oh.
no, I'm like, I'm messing with y'all. Y'all don't know this is a real thing here. But no, and she was out there in the rain, and she was crying. And I was like, what's wrong with that lady? And I found out she was crying for me. And I'm like, why is she crying for me? Don't she know I'm a horrible person? And she ended up coming in to see me. And we had a conversation. She said, hey man, you're not a horrible person. You just did a horrible thing. Like, walk toward the light. And that's what I want to say to young people. Like, you're going to make a mistake. Just walk toward the light. Turn the light on in the room so you can quit kicking stuff over. But stop letting people, like, don't let the world beat you up because it's so cynical. You know, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when it comes, it is like a tree of life. So that's what I would say, like, and get a hope tattoo. So my hope there.
Dorothy, do we have time for audience questions?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
Yeah. Don't be scared.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is David Veloza. I am faith-based.
Wait.
Can we get a microphone out to the
We
people?
can share a mic. How about that?
Yeah.
People.
Yeah.
Thank you, sister.
Like I said, my name is David Veloza. I'm the leader for the Latinx and the men's faith-based communities at Catholic Campus Ministry. This question was for Sister Helen. I know I meant to ask you more about this yesterday, but it was a bit of a rush there, and I had to leave, you had to leave, you know. So for my men's group for next week, our topic is going to be being allies towards women, and one of the topics that we're talking about deals with abortion. And I know we've talked a little bit about this, but I guess my question is, because abortion and the death penalty are sort of on that, are sort of similar area, I guess I wanted to ask, kind of like your opinion, like, are they in the same area where you believe neither of them should be allowed? Should maybe one be allowed but not the other? I guess, like, where do we draw the line?
I will.
We turning this one over to everybody. Everybody don't take this one, all right? Of course, I'm against aborting life, unborn life. But how can you do that without supporting women in their decisions for life? I mean, not to do anything for women, not to support them, not to give them the support they need, and just say you're against abortion. You end up being pro-birth, but you ain't pro-life. What happens after that baby's born? Who's there? There's a lot of ways we abort life. All the talk about prisons and throwing people away is aborting life. Children not making, they're getting a good education before the 3rd grade and they fall behind forever is aborting their life. Justice Louis Brandeis, the first Jewish person on the Supreme Court, said education helps us to know who we are, and when we can't get educated and get a good education It aborts our intellectual life, and it aborts our knowing who we are and what our gifts are. So to be pro-life, what I found is that plenty of people I talk to said Catholics say they're pro-life, and what they mean is I'm for innocent life. And that was the heart of my dialogue with Pope John Paul II when I got a chance to have a dialogue with him. And I said, Your Holiness, I'll meet a lot of Catholics and they say they're pro-life. They mean innocent life. But when it comes to guilty life, they draw a line and say they don't have any dignity. They deserve what they get and they ought to be punished. And they draw a dividing line in human beings. That even the guilty among us, and Ronaldo said that so good, I'm not that act, I'm a person. What about respecting the dignity of life? All life, even those among us that made a mistake. And if we didn't have all these privileges and these cushions around us and resources, we'd be the ones in there. I mean, you know, we really have to be humble, those of us who have received so much. No, I didn't do drugs. No, I didn't kill anybody. No, I didn't get involved in a bank robbery. I mean, I'm a proper nun. We started a gang of nuns to go rob banks, but found out it didn't work. I mean, you know, no, I haven't done any really bad things, right? But I've never been in situations, and when I lived among African American people in the inner city of New Orleans, they became my teachers. And when all the rules don't work for you, when you don't have all the resources. So pro-life is all across the board, but we cannot touch that abortion question without talking about the agency of women and supporting women in decisions. We just can't. It's just, you know, and I think most people kind of know that, and don't let people divide those moral questions like that and absolutize one side of it. Other people gonna get in there too. We got it going back and forth, but get in there on that question, because that's a big one. Okay.
Can I not use a mic?
No,
No,
you got it.
Okay.
Gotta use the mic.
Sorry.
We're taping it
I'm gonna
else.
empower you to not use your mic.
Thank you.
And speak loud and loud.
What I'm asking though,
Oh,
this is
Do
my
you have a role?
request. My request is because we're taping it for other people who can't be with
Okay,
us,
I'll use
and
the
it's
mic.
difficult to manage
I
that.
just moved it far, so.
Okay, cool.
This is kind of a personal question because I'm the co-president of Student Against Incarceration on campus. You're at our event on Saturday.
That's great.
I'm also taking a lot of inside out classes with DePaul, and this is a personal question for myself because I'm in a class about masculinity, and 2 weeks ago we got so deep in trauma, and I kind of had a panic attack while in Stateville, and I was like, because I've gone through a lot of stuff, and I don't want to compare this is just advice for a wise person. I don't want to compare my trauma with the people on the inside because trauma's, they said, relative. We all experience trauma and it can't be compared. But this is my life work to help people who are incarcerated. I already devoted this to my life and using art because I'm going to grad school for museum studies, and I want to use museums as a way of, and art as a way of bridging the gaps with those who are incarcerated. But when I was inside in the class in Stateville, I had a panic attack and started crying because I felt like I was taking up their voice by talking too much about myself. But then some of my classmates who are on the inside, they're like, no, we like hearing you talk about yourself. So I'd be like, where's the healthy balance in talking about your trauma and yourself, but also allowing space for them to talk about themselves? Because I don't want to feel guilty. I know, I'm on the outside and, I have other agencies and stuff, but I just don't want to feel guilty. Do you kind of understand what I'm saying? So, with Helen, sister, sorry, when you go inside, where's the balance for you where you're there to listen, but you're also there to, give advice and, talk about yourself at the same time? So that's my question.
Thank you.
You get into this too, because I have a feeling you could really speak to her experience much better than me. What you learned from that experience? Do you know what pushed you over the edge and why you had a panic attack? See, what did that experience teach you?
What did it teach me?
Yeah, that you had the panic attack and you broke down and cried, and you're looking for balance. So what did that experience teach you?
I don't know, maybe that I haven't fully dealt with my grief of my life.
Yeah, well, it's all very complex and, for sure. I mean, for me, what keeps me going is, I mean, I'm in there with the people in prison, but then I'll walk out and I know my responsibility to them is to come here and to tell these stories. I feel a real mission to do that, a real imperative to do that. And I also have balance in my life. I play cards, we play cards, play cards, drink a beer, cook some good food, invite your friends over and eat some good food together, look at a good movie, plant a few plants. They all died, because I had to travel. I know I can't do the plants anymore, I leave them. I can't have a pet if that pet would die. You find out what gives you joy and you do it, and so that's a few things. You gotta have a whole life, and the other thing is friendship. Develop friendship like a garden. Can't live life without closeness with somebody. And we can't impose ourselves on anybody, say, be my friend, I choose you, be my friend. Can't do that. But when you notice that you have a similarity with a person, then you invite them into a deeper friendship and invest yourself in it, because friendship doesn't just happen. That's, I think, really important. Anybody else on the panel want to speak to this, balance in your life?
Yes.
Of course, Ronaldo. Now we're back to Ronaldo.
Well, thank you. I've been waiting for this moment. No, I'll tell you, I really want to say this to you. Don't minimize your trauma, making the assumption that you're taking up too much space. Because when you have a moment, you have a moment. And that's not something you can draw out. That's not something you can measure out. I do believe in healthy boundaries, right? And so, I actually teach, right, navigating the Illinois Department of Correction courses. And so I get the importance of boundaries, but I also recognize what they call the wet concrete theory.
I never heard of that.
I'm gonna break it down. So, no, well, really, the wet concrete theory is a theory out of psychology that is predicated around when something traumatic happens, you really want to get help in immediately before the concrete dries, right? Because once the concrete dries, right, it's there and it'll just buffer, right? And so I would encourage you, right? I'm very familiar with Stateville, right? Hated it, but I also recognize, because I was there 2 months ago, and I thought I was over that stuff. But when I walked through the gate, I smelled the sweat and the steel from the handcuffs. And it triggered me. I was in a discussion on a panel, and someone showed a picture of a cell. And it triggered me, and I started crying. But I wasn't crying because of the picture. I was crying because the picture didn't tell the true story. And so all that being said, we all gonna, if we get tapped, we're going to release. That's what happens. Your body and your mind needed to be released. And I would encourage you, don't resist that. Just make sure you make room to be gracious to yourself, right? Because we're tougher than people think. That's what I always try to remind people of incarcerated people. Quit handling us like we're fragile. I hate that. I'll be really honest, quit handling me like that. I'm tough, right? But at the same time, I'm gentle. I'm fragile. I have all those attributes as any other person. And if you treat me like we're equal, then I can treat you like an equal. And so if you're going to go in that space, don't go in there with a superior idea of, well, I must give you room. No, give yourself grace.
Yeah, amen.
Amen?
Hallelujah.
You want to speak to it?
All I heard when he said that we're equal, I heard equity. Because we're not all equal. We're all in different places, right? I don't know why I felt the need to pull that out there, but that's there. Nope, I don't have anything else. Y'all said it. Heal. Continue to heal. and be in alignment, and then you'll be able to discern when it's your turn to step up and when it's your turn to step back. You know what I mean? Feel that. You know, listen, right? And also listening, right? You can hear someone speaking and know when it's time for you to step up and share your story, right? You can hear someone speaking and also know when it's time to step back and allow them to share their story. Also turning your story into a dialogue, a conversation, right? And finding that common ground between you two, right? That helps me to not feel like I'm talking about myself too much, is to make it a conversation about the both of us, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what that showed me, young lady, was your compassion. Your compassion to identify not only your trauma, but relating it to the individuals that's incarcerated. Now, the individuals that's incarcerated, we're kind of different. And it's because of what we're going through. But one thing I want to tell you, we can recognize when you step in the room and you are genuine and that you want to help. See, we sit around all day. What goes on in our heads, we get to learn about what they call being real. You know what I'm saying? We practice that on a daily basis. So anything that comes across too textbooky or too disconnected, oh, you're gonna hear about it. We'll tell you, so you'll know that you're probably kind of treading lightly on light water, because somebody's gonna speak up and they're gonna let you know. But one thing, if we're kind of quiet, it's because we feel you, we respect where you're coming from, we respect you being you. The genuineness, you taking your time out to come in there to see what's happening with us and showing that you care. Because we got individuals that work in Illinois Department of Corrections. And trust me, they don't show it. And we show them that we know that they don't show it. We let them know, quick, off the bat, no cut, no chaser. We develop a sense of no nonsense, zero tolerance over the years of incarcerations. It's like when a new guy comes in and he's full of it. Hey man, sit on down somewhere, man. You ain't talking about nothing, man. You got a lot of learning to do. So that's the way that we approach individuals when they come in from the outside. We'll sit back, we'll give you a chance, we'll give you the open floor. Cool. But once we see that genuineness, oh, you ain't gonna be able to get rid of us. We're gonna be your best friend. We're gonna be like Mr. Hudson and Sister Helen here. They'll form a relationship with you. They'll open up a relationship with you. That's how we are. So keep doing what you're doing. It's okay to show feelings here and there. Like she said, you'll know when to pull back. You'll know when to stop. Don't feel guilty about sharing your trauma, taking up someone else's time. But what I implore you to do is always be genuine. That's the most important thing to a person that's locked up. That we see the genuine human side of you. Because all we got from the system, and most of the time throughout our life, was a bunch of BS, was a bunch of spin-off, was a bunch of half-truths, was a bunch of lies, was a bunch of illusions, misconceptions. So keep doing what you're doing and staying real with it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrea Oliveros, and I'm also a faith-based community leader. I lead the scripture and questioning and seeking small groups here in TCM. I would like to begin by saying thank you for sharing your wisdom. So far it's been awesome. And then also, I want to ask, what, as someone who leads very opposite sides of the spectrum, of people who are very connected to their faith, and people who may have no faith or are wanting to share their faith, what drew you to wanting to get into faith? Because I know Ronaldo mentioned that got you out of that hardship was Jesus. So like, I'm like, what drew you, and like, how did you answer those questions of like, how can I follow this God that like put me through all this hardship, and like understanding like, yeah, just like what drew you to following Christ and like understanding that like hardship, I guess, is my question. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Was that for me?
It was in general, but
Okay,
if you
let
would
me-
like.
No, I'm a yield.
I'm a yield. I'm a yield. Nobody points blank.
That way.
I'm a yield. Just say something.
All of the above.
You hear them?
Go to it.
Don't be shy, Shay.
Because faith has a lot of dimensions to it.
Okay. Can you reiterate?
Yeah. So basically, like, what drew you into your faith, and like, what made you want to seek out Christ? Like, I lead like very different spaces of people who are connected to their faith, and like we read scripture, and it's kind of like a Bible study. And then I also lead a small group with, students that are not connected to faith at all, or like are seeking out spirituality or Catholicism or Christianity in general. So kind of like, what drew you to wanting to seek out Christ?
I grew up in a church. My mom and dad are deacon and deaconess of the church. My dad's best friend's the pastor of the church he attends now, and the church I grew up in. My grandfather was the pastor of. But it wasn't until I became an adult and started to like really live life and experience life where I began to create a relationship with God. Right? I don't know what I don't know how I would draw me to God. I guess nothing else worked for me. Nothing else worked. And as I build more relationship with God, I begin to have a better understanding of who God is, right? And He's not a book, right? They're part of who I am on the inside, right? And once I begin to really understand that, like, not I am God, but I'm God, you know what I mean? I was created in God's image, right? And that part of me is there. And so because it's there, it's automatically gonna come out somewhere, some form or fashion. I do have alternative beliefs. So I call myself an African spiritualist Christian, because I believe in Christianity, right? And grew up in Christianity. I don't believe in the religious part of Christianity. I'm a very spiritual person, right? There's a difference between religion and spirituality, right? There you go, there it is. When I begin to understand the difference between spirituality and religion, right? And that helped me to build relationship, because religion keeps you from building authentic relationship with God. When I begin to understand that, it kind of drew me closer to God and being more spiritual. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
There's that hand right there.
Oh, wait. Oh, Brian.
I kind of wanted to chime in with you with that. You ever been in a situation where you just can't explain it? There is no answer, there is no thing that comes to mind. It just is what it is, it happens. But deep down inside, you say, man, is that what God looks like? That power. When you're in situations and it's traumatizing, it's some of the worst of the worst. I'm probably sure everybody's been there and said, God help me. As you move forward, things change, right? Something was answered. Almost like proof. Almost like an existence that you know is there. You can't see it. You can't touch them. But you can feel them. Your intuition knows it. It lines up by itself with them. You might not want to agree with it, but try waking up on your own. Or try missing a day. So the aspect of me and my faith, it took me a long time. It took a lot of not getting it, a lot of wanting to think that I controlled my own will, that I was in control of all of this. I wasn't in control of nothing. Absolutely not one thing. As much as you would like to think that you're in control, the only thing that you control on is what you can actually physically grab and what comes out of your mouth. Other than that, you can't control what's going on outside there in the next few minutes. Anything can happen, but that's his power. That lets you know that it's something bigger and greater than you that controls all of this. What aspect you want to view it from, what spiritual, what religion you want to view it from. When people separate religions, I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, I'm Buddhist, I'm Zen, I'm whatever the case may be. The fact is you are acknowledging that there is a power that is greater than you. All of them deal with it, including Islam. All of them deal with it. A central power, a central deity, a figure, someone who's pulling the strings, someone who makes things happen, someone who creates it. If you have a shadow of a doubt, try growing a plant, try making a plant. Have you ever created one? Something as simple as a seed, which blossoms, creates the air that you breathe for millions on a daily basis. Something as simple as a seed. Who would ever think that? But you're in control of it? I think not. I think not. So keep that in perspective. So when we talk about spirituality and believing in a power that's greater than us, don't think of just all the traumatic times. Think of all the good things too. Think of all the happiness that's created in the world. Think of all the joy that's created in the world. Think of all the accomplishments and the blessings that you receive on a daily basis that we sometimes forget and take for granted. It's easy to lose focus on that when we get wrapped into the self-absorbing of our accomplishments. But once one of those things are gone, you got to call up. He kind of puts a check and balance in that to try to keep you connected. So you won't get too grandiose. So you will give the acknowledgement that it's something that exists that's greater than you, that has provided for you, whether it's your will, whether it's your intellect. We all like to challenge us. I'm pretty sure this is a group of students and faculty and staff. We all like to challenge our intellect. We all like to build upon it. But the simple fact of the matter, where did it come from? Who drives it? Who gave it to you? It's just born and said, oh, I'll hire my intellect. I'll hire my own brain. I'll do all the thinking in the world. That's a gift. Because there's some people that do not have the capacity. In various forms. Be grateful for what you have today. Be grateful for the opportunities. So when you think in terms of spiritualism and powers is greater than you, just look around. It's a whole world, whole universe full of it. That's it.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Let me go on this side of the space, okay? All right. Somebody back here? Yep.
Hi, I'm Humaira. I work over in the Division of Mission and Ministry. So that's kind of the only credential I really have. I really loved what was being discussed at the end, Ronaldo, when you were saying don't be afraid of making mistakes, and also don't make the mistake of fearing making mistakes. I really loved when you were saying that. But what I wanted to ask you, and also everyone on the panel, is how do you come back from making a mistake? And how do you forgive yourself? You know, forget forgiveness from others. How do you begin healing yourself from making what seems to be something that you just simply cannot come back from? Especially when it feels like there is no one on your side, and especially when it, especially when it feels like you just have made the ultimate mistake that nobody else can forgive you for. If nobody else can forgive you, then how can you start to forgive yourself?
Is it dead? Well, we got this one.
Yeah, yours don't work. I think that's a really, really important question. And I'll use myself because I think it's an important thing that I've learned. My name is Ronaldo Hudson, and I'm responsible for taking a man's life. How do you forgive yourself for that? Who can forgive me? It came to me when I was sitting in a cell that I had to forgive myself, because people will reject you. I'm not just an advocate of that. People will reject you, but Christ will accept you. And so for me, what allowed me to forgive myself is I began to unpack all of my hurt. I began to just lay it out. And I stopped being ashamed of stinky stuff, because we tend to hide that. If a friend is coming over and you know you didn't clean up and you start throwing stuff everywhere and kicking stuff, maybe I'm the only one to do that, but you know what I mean? And you I know I really need to just clean up. And so what I learned was that I really have to forgive Ronaldo first, because when I realized that I was forgivable, it became so much easier to receive other people. And then it dawned on me, I stopped caring about what other people thought, just to be really honest, because I realized how fickle people can be. Like you today, hate you tomorrow. The next day, oh, I love you again. So I'm like, wait a minute, am I okay with Ronaldo? And I did that personally through study. I started, I don't fight thoughts with thoughts. I began to fight my thoughts with words. And so when some people talk about spirituality and different things as an example, I learned the Bible, and I tease people about this, from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22:21, because I wanted to beat Christians up. I did. That was my thing. I wish you would come try to talk to me about baby Jesus, right? I'm going to beat you down, right? Because I know you ain't going to read the book, right? And you finna try to tell me about a Jesus and all the books is wrote by Paul? I'm like, wait a minute. Where's the book of Jesus, right? And so, I thought I was really smart. But what I learned as I began to unpack the book, right? I started quoting the book to me. Do you get it? I started preaching to me. I am my congregation. Yeah, right? And so I preach regular to me. The Bible has this thing that says it's a scripture, right? I like messing with the sister. It says, choose ye this day who you will serve. Huh? I place before you life and death. And then it gives you a real twister. It says, but choose life. It take away the choice. Right? And so when I started realizing, hey, some wisdom, this ain't Ronaldo stuff. This is, ancient writings. And so when I started having those twisted thoughts about, hey, kill yourself. You'll never be better than your worst act. Kill yourself. I said, wait a minute. Great is he that is in me than he that is in the world. Like, I started fighting that stuff. Like, I want to do some happy stuff. And so I'm saying all that to say, I fight all those bad thoughts with the word. And for the people who choose other than that, God bless you. But for me and my house, right? I'm just saying, and that's what I do. And that gave me the strength to be able to say to a system going back to ending mass incarceration, y'all not serving God's best for dinner. I'm gonna have to call y'all on that. Because God said, if I turn from my wicked ways and my unrighteous thoughts, he will show me the sure mercies of David. And I said, Lord, I'm gonna try you on that one. And then there's another part of that scripture. And he will abundantly pardon you. I'm sitting here with two of them right now. I got 2 pardons. Because I chose to believe that word, and I preached that word to Ronaldo. The congregation of one is now a part of a congregation of many. So anyway, that's what I do. And I'm not moving from that position till he close my eyes. That's my disposition.
I'm gonna get on up in there.
Okay,
Just a little bit,
here we
just a little
go.
bit, just a little bit. Okay, I have a tool. It's been that my bishop's husband gave us in a seminar presentation one day, and it was we have 6 seconds to come into agreement with an emotion. 6 seconds. Once you, after that 6 seconds, whatever decision you've made, that's what sticks, right? And when we think about what forgiveness is a conscious and deliberate decision to release yourself of negative emotions or visions towards someone, and in this case, it'd be yourself. I say when you have that feeling of guilt or whatever it is to choose to not be in agreement with that emotion. Recognize what happened and move on from it. You know, make the conscious and deliberate decision and choice to say, I release myself of this. What has happened and that cannot be changed. So why dwell on that, right? Is your dwelling going to help change what has already happened? It's not. So release yourself of it and find ways to do better, right? To do different, right? Holding myself accountable helps me to forgive myself and to heal, because accountability is the opportunity to see what happened, right? What you did and how you can finding ways and solutions to not do it again, and then putting those into action, right? And so when I hold myself accountable, it helps me to forgive myself. This is what happened. What can I do to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And then put those into action, right? Still giving myself grace and space and room to mess up again, right? Yeah, and just knowing that I'm gonna mess up again. So why just keep piling it up on myself, right? Because I did this over here, I can't forgive myself for that. Now I messed up here, and that's another thing that I can't forgive myself. Who wants to do that? I don't want to do that. So I've chosen, right, to release myself of it and not to do it again.
What's the reason of life?
We have come almost to 8 o'clock. I want to thank our panelists and our moderator for their wisdom, for their testimony, for their witness, and for their sharings, for their stories. I believe strongly that stories connect us, stories activate us, stories motivate us, and stories are good to snuggle up around and to hold us close. Thank you for your stories today. We are going to shut down for the night.